So I want you to think, and I'm going to start with you, Dr. Julia, about a specific case, if you have any, where you saw this inconsistency show itself. So, a lot of times when I talk about threat assessment, I talk about the assessments are great and no, no diminishing, John, what you've created or what Dr. Cornell created or what the NTEC model is out there, but the assessment is so much only a small part of the process. The plan to support that student, as we've been talking about, what are the things that keep them off that pathway after you make your assessment, is key. And to me, I have a story that I've talked about before, where we had a fifth grader whose parents thought, when he said he wanted to buy a ghillie suit. And for those who don't know what a ghillie suit is, it's the standard garb of a military sniper, so they can hide in the trees and bushes and be customized. They thought, sure, we'll buy you a ghillie suit for your fifth grade birthday. And then he proceeded to get up on the roof of his school. Now, no weapon, no nothing, no writings or intent leakage, anything like that. But obviously, you could imagine it caused a little bit of alarm. And so we worked on that assessment. We supported that student for years. And things were going smooth until, of course, the transition to high school, because the two schools, the K-5 and the middle, were on the same ground. So they were like a campus model. So they knew each other. But then when it was the launch to the high school, they lost continuity even within the district of what was going on. And of course, things immediately popped off. So for me, that was one of my first red flags of, I've really got to get them all in the same system and pushing them. If you've all got a moment to think of something that you've seen this happen, I want to give folks that idea that it happens everywhere. It's okay. We're not blaming or shaming when we talk about these things. We have folks to learn from them. And don't all raise your hand at once.
Yeah, so I want to hear, because I think Dr. Weller alluded to this earlier when she was doing her intro, and like her, I come from practicing in really tiny districts, and I feel like the inconsistencies and non-standardization stand out even more when you only have, 3,000, 3,500, 4,500 students and a limited number of schools. And I know I saw a lot of that when I was practicing. Jason, to your point, it seems like that cutoff is high school. So elementary schools kind of tend to be a little bit more, lenient and put support plans in place. And then they get to the secondary level and, all of a sudden now this kid is on everyone's radar, whereas before he was being pretty well supported, he or she. But yeah, I definitely saw the impacts of that. And even in between elementary schools. So some of the districts that I practiced in would have several elementary schools that fed into one middle, one high school. And even across elementary schools, different principals have different ideas of how things should be handled. And, a child that maybe not on anyone's radar, able to be managed without formalized supports in one elementary school would not have the same experience in another elementary school. And so in two of the districts that I practiced in, where I started behavioral threat assessment protocols, this was back before we had anything like PCG, we were just doing things pencil, paper, and I was going based on what I thought was best practice. But, just trying to get everyone on the same page there. But Dr. Well, I'm wondering whether that was your experience as well, too, in those tinier districts.
For sure. I think that in the smaller areas, my district right now, I have 3 elementary schools, a kindergarten center, a middle school, and a high school. So if a family has a child in our middle school and high school and they're being treated differently, it is very obvious. And when you are in the smaller communities, and I'm sure, John, you experience this where you are as well, but they talk at the little league fields and the football games and they talk about the things that their kids have been through. And if one school is doing it differently than another school, it is really difficult to explain that from an equity lens from the district office. I won't go into too many details because it is a relatively fresh situation, but I do have a situation. Like I said, this is the first year we've implemented the behavioral threat assessment process in the district I'm in now, and we have a student who has risen to the level of discipline referrals, we'll say it that way, multiple times over the past 4 years, 5 years. I mean, just ongoing statements of like threatening statements, things that are very concerning. So this year we were able to go through the entire BTAM process. I think the one thing that the process does, to your point, Jason, it's not just about getting the answers of the in the moment. It's let's talk about what we're going to do for you and how we're going to support you. And then when you do bring the parent in and you do bring outside people in and you put them through the interview process, it's a reality check. It becomes a real serious thing for them. So they start to realize, like, oh, you want to send the police to my house to search my child's room? Like, okay, I really need to get involved. Let me sign that permission to evaluate. Let me sign that third party counseling form. Like, here you go. How do I get out of this office quicker? And it also, for that student who hasn't had attention, whether it's negative or positive in the moment, but that attention and that support. I ate cupcakes with that student the day before winter break, and him and I were talking about how excited we were to have the break off. Like, he's a totally different kid because we were able to get him counseling. We were able to give him the interventions that he needs to process through. And he is just wonderful. I mean, it's really crazy the difference in a 4-month window from October till now that you can have a conversation with him and he can talk about how he feels. Just from that quick. Now, obviously, something could change long term, but we're working on that. And as long as he stays in the districts in Delaware that are using this model, he's not going to, they'll see what we have, they'll see his plans, it'll transfer with him. So it's pretty beneficial from that lens.
That's such a great example of how we can, by using a standardized protocol, really change the course of a student's life and
yeah, the trajectory for sure.
That pathway. Yeah.
And I love the fact that it also illustrates that our traditional way of doing things, and this is maybe where, and John, I'll let you jump in with a story, but I also want to, at some point we got to start talking about people want to do it their own way, but by doing it their own way, this kid was just going to go through this cycle of getting referred. But by being stopped and being forced to go through what, again, people have wrongly labeled as a scary process, now we've been able to put a kid on a pathway. That's awesome.